In the span of just 30 years, phones have come a long way. We've come from bricks to flips to little slivers of metal in your pocket that can slip through sewer grails on a sidewalk. But despite all that progress, I can't help but feel like the innovations have just sort of stopped. Nowadays, they just slap a bigger camera in the newest model and they call it a day. Or worse, they take away things that should never be taken. First, it was the headphone jack, then it was the SIM card tray. What's next? The charging port? Anyways, at around or over $1,000, it's getting real hard to justify buying a new flagship phone nowadays, especially when you could buy one for a fifth of the price. Well, you could, but would they actually be good? Now you need a functioning smartphone to do pretty much anything. Scan QR codes, snap photos, make calls, two-factor, not to mention all the important doom scrolling. For better or for worse, everything is on our phones and we need something that can keep up with it. But the budget phone space has always been unreliable. But are there actually budget phones now that you can pick up and you won't feel like they cheapened out? That's the exact question I want to solve today. And to do that, I've decided to take two approaches. First, I bought a flagship phone, the Samsung Galaxy S22, which was $800 and now is $200 used. And then second, I delved into the world of proper budget phones and scooped up a Xiaomi Poco X5 Pro, which also costs less than $200. Will either phone manage to trade blows with a $1,000 phone, or are we truly beholden to the price and stagnation of the times? If you're plugged into the world of tech, then you probably recognize Xiaomi as a very well-regarded name. But if you aren't, then I know what you're thinking. You bought some junk Chinese phone for pennies? Hear me out. The specs on this thing honestly aren't half bad. It's got a 6.5-inch AMOLED screen, 256 gigabytes of storage, a 5,000 mAh battery, and wait a minute, it's even got a headphone jack. Oh, we're calling it here, folks. Video's over. Just kidding. But seriously, on paper, this thing is $190 and it's pretty impressive. The Samsung S22 is no slouch either though. It's also got an AMOLED screen, the same storage, and wireless charging. Now we could sit here and yap about specs all day. When it comes to phones, is how it actually feels to use. Just by holding these two phones in my hand, the S22 immediately stands out as feeling more premium. For some reason, holding the Poco really just sparks a deep-seated instinct to slap a case on it for fear that it'll shatter into a million pieces. As it turns out, I was right to feel that way. Compared to Samsung's aluminum frame, the Xiaomi is pure plastic. But the physical build of a phone is only a small part of the equation. What really matters is what's on the inside. Right out of the box, the Xiaomi comes with some weird games like Jewel Blast and Bubble. Who doesn't love to see some trashy games installed on their phone, right? Not to say the Samsung doesn't have its own bloat in the form of 500 Google and Samsung apps, but the games are weird. Surprisingly, Xiaomi has a Google Play Store, which I didn't think they'd have considering it's from China. But as it turns out, this phone is using what's called a global ROM instead of a stock one. Basically, it's pre-tinkered to make it more accessible to people outside of China, which is great for pretty much everyone who can't read Chinese, like me. Before I start installing apps though, I need to set up my phone plan. So I got into Xiaomi settings to do that, and what do I see? No eSIM capabilities. It's gonna take weeks for that SIM card to get here from Mint Mobile. I guess Samsung wins for my calls and texts. Now, of course, my quest for a budget phone would be all for naught if the things I actually did on my phone cost me an arm and a leg. Like when you're traveling to new countries and you have to buy overpriced SIM cards at the airport, or accidentally buying a fake SIM card from a scammer. Ooh, that's rough. What is helpful is an affordable eSIM that doesn't eat up the money I saved on my budget phone. That's where today's sponsor comes in, Saily. Saily is a simple eSIM app that helps you stay connected in over 200 places around the world. It's the perfect travel buddy that's always ready to go. Unlike my travel buddy, Jake, who packs his carry-on the night before a flight. That's too stressful for me. Travel experts, like you and me, we just download the Saily app on iOS or Android and choose our data plan. And then it works just like that. If for whatever reason your eSIM isn't compatible though, Saily offers free refunds, so it's 100% risk-free. Try out Saily today, but don't forget to apply our coupon code SWITCHANDCLICK to get an exclusive 15% discount on Saily data plans. Download the Saily app or go to saily.com/switchandclick. Basically, the Xiaomi is off to a rough start to say the least, but what is the actual day-to-day? One very obvious upper hand it has over the S22 is of course the bigger screen size. That whole half-inch more of screen real estate. When I put the two phones side by side, it's really hard to notice any difference. In fact, with both phones at maximum brightness this, the Poco was blowing Samsung out of the water. But then I saw this. Look how much more defined the goose is on the Samsung compared to the Xiaomi. You can see the droplets on its feathers, when on the Poco, you can barely see it at all. It turns out the S22 doesn't just use a regular AMOLED, but this thing called Dynamic AMOLED 2X, which sounds like marketing jargon, but does in fact have better color depth and contrast. But even though Xiaomi's screen falls a little short, overall it's still plenty colorful and bright for most people, especially for a budget phone. Getting this close in quality to a flagship wasn't exactly something I was willing to bet money on. I suppose the question just becomes what you care about, screen size or display quality. Another thing a lot of people care about, including me, is how their phone will last after a long day. There's nothing worse than being out and about, phone gets drained to 20% or less. On paper, the Xiaomi has a huge 5000 mAh battery compared to Samsung's 3700, which makes sense. It's a bigger phone, it's got more junk in the trunk. But how long a battery will last isn't all just about the numbers. Depending on the phone's software or the build, the 5000 hour battery could perform just as well as 3700 or worse. So I put these bad boys to the test. First up was the Xiaomi to carry me through the day. After a morning and evening of using maps, YouTube, video calling, and some sparse social media scrolling, I still had roughly half my battery left by the end of the day, enough for some extra gaming to wind down without having to even plug it in. The next day, I put the Samsung through the same thing, and by the end, it was practically on its last legs, panting like Patrick after the same task at about 21%. If I had to grab a phone on the way out for a long day, the Poco is definitely the one that's going in my pocket. It even has up to 63-watt charging and charges all the way up to full in about an hour, compared to Samsung that does it in a little under 2. Sadly though, there's a stark lack of wireless charging on the Xiaomi. Personally, I don't feel too hung up since I use wired charging 99% of the time anyways, and for a budget phone, it makes sense to miss some nice to have features. But hey, you got the headphone jack. You win some, you lose some. Next was to test how well Xiaomi could handle gaming. Gaming is one of the things that you can do to push a phone's hardware, and as it turned out, it wasn't even close. Even though Xiaomi handled some games with some intense animations and visual effects, it was skipping frames like crazy on just medium setting. Meanwhile, Samsung played the same game smooth as butter. So smooth, I pushed the graphics all the way to the highest, and it still handled it without a sweat. Almost. There were some frame skips here and there, but honestly not that big of a deal compared to the Poco. It's pretty clear who wins here. So gaming might not be a big deal to some of you out there, but it's a good indicator of how your phone will do when push comes to shove. Of course, that doesn't mean Xiaomi's hardware is a lost cause when actually using it day to day, or even more intense things like Discord screen share calls and YouTube at the same time. It's okay. Well, except for one thing. Every time I rotate the screen, there was a very noticeable lag spike. It didn't matter what I was doing, if I was watching a video or just scrolling or whatever, the screen rotations loaded at least half a second slower than the Samsung, while the Samsung, smooth as butter. Honestly, it makes me think it might be a software thing. It's hard to imagine that a device can handle voice, screen sharing, playing YouTube videos, and then not be able to rotate the screen. Weird. This next category though has probably what I consider the most interesting results out of everything, and that's the camera. If you take a close look at the back of the Xiaomi, you'll see that it says 108 megapixels, which is an outrageously large number, especially considering the latest iPhone and the Pixel models are only 48 megapixels, but maybe Xiaomi would surprise me. So I popped open the camera and started snapping some photos, except it was only a few seconds before I noticed something seemed off. And I was right. The color difference between Samsung and Xiaomi was so staggering. For whatever reason, the Poco takes photos with a green tint and even looks washed out. Even the front-facing camera had the same issue. So I went into settings to see if there was anything to tinker with, and came with nothing. Then I thought maybe there was just something weird with the native camera app. So I installed a different one, but nope, same thing. The same washed out colors. It seems like Samsung is getting the upper hand once again. If the Xiaomi can't win in color accuracy, maybe it can win in photo clarity. It's supposed to have 108 megapixels after all, and the results were confusing and disappointing. Take this for example. I took the same photo 4 times, twice on the Samsung at 12 megapixels and 50, and then twice on Poco at 12 and 108. Out of all the 4 photos, the Samsung at 12 megapixels came out looking the best. It had the cleanest detail and clarity, while the other photos came out looking blurry or over sharpened. I mean, look at how insane that artifacting around the text is. What was going on? Isn't more pixels supposed to make things look better? So I did some research and it turns out megapixels are hardly the thing we should be looking at when taking photos. What determines if the pixels look good is the sensor, the lens, and the processing. So in this case, the Samsung is the clear winner here. As for why the 12 megapixel looked better, I think that just comes down to processing. Either way, it just goes to show you how more isn't always better. So in terms of hardware, we've gone through pretty much everything a buyer could look for. But now it's time to get to the nitty-gritty. That's the stuff baked directly into the phone OS. As I mentioned before, Samsung and Xiaomi are using their own flavors of Android. But is there something here that really makes it all that different? Samsung has completely removed a well-loved feature that comes with basically every other Android phone, and that's the profiles feature. You can swap between profiles or users and keep different apps attached to them. Samsung only has a work profile, which you can't even use unless you have a code from Android Enterprise or something. And I snooped around the Poco setting, hoping that Xiaomi was generous enough to keep this feature, but unfortunately, I don't know if they did. But it does have something similar called second space. You enter the password to your second space, you set it up, and boom! It's like you're on a different phone. It's still not as great as having a bunch of profiles, but it's better than Samsung's work profile. There's also a handy-dandy cache clearing feature that frees up your memory on your phone that comes with a Poco. By the end of all my testing, I didn't know what to think. The Poco X5 Pro is by no means a bad phone. In fact, for $190, it's pretty great. Compared to our used Samsung flagship at the same price, it does fall short in a lot of ways. No eSIM, no wireless charging, worse camera, worse processing, but there were categories where it beats the Samsung, like battery life and size. If I were trying to buy a new phone and only had $200 to spare in my pocket, I would be pretty happy with a Poco. You can throw a bunch of stuff at it, even games, and it has a headphone jack. But is it worth buying over the Samsung? That probably depends on who you are and what you're willing to compromise. Either way, one thing is clear. The days of having to buy new flagships to get a good experience are long behind us. If you're wondering how I felt though about a brand spanking new Samsung S22, check out this video here. Bye!